but we have no control over the gold, whether it's exploration, production, or as you have seen, refining.
Burkina Faso just made a move that could shake the global gold market forever. It's Captain Ibrahim Traoré, standing on red earth, launching the country's first gold refinery with a silent defiance the world wasn't ready for. So what exactly is Traoré building? And why is this small nation suddenly the center of Africa's biggest resource revolution? Let's find out. The silence was deliberate. There were no grand press releases, no foreign investors lined up with champagne glasses. Just a line of armored trucks, engineers in dusty boots, and a crowd of locals watching history crack open beneath the hammer of a new order. On the morning of July 9, 2025, Captain Ibrahim Traoré gave a single nod and construction began. The first national gold refinery of Burkina Faso was no longer an idea. It was real. And it was rising from the Sahel itself. This wasn't just an industrial project. It was a statement of power. The ceremony happened on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, in a secured area that had, until weeks earlier, been a stretch of unused land. Now it's a high-priority zone marked for 24/7 surveillance, fenced with concrete slabs, and already humming with the movement of construction machinery. Sources close to the presidency confirmed that the blueprint was finalized in early June, but the timing of the public launch was intentionally held back to avoid international pressure and media interference. "This was a decision made with the sovereignty of silence," said one advisor. "We announced it only once it could no longer be stopped." What exactly is being built? A fully state-run gold refinery, capable of processing an estimated 100 to 400 kilograms of gold per day at full capacity. The facility will not just melt and purify ore, it will grade, package, certify, and label gold bars for domestic reserves and direct export. For a country that produces more than 57 metric tons of gold annually, this plant represents control over pricing, over data, over wealth itself. Until now, Burkina Faso has exported nearly all of its gold in raw form. That gold travels to refineries in Switzerland, Dubai, and India, where it's processed, rebranded, and sold for up to 3 to 5 times its initial price. For decades, Burkinabe miners have pulled wealth from their land only to watch it leave unrefined, invisible, and often undocumented. The profits, claimed by foreign refineries, logistics firms, and international partners, who rarely pay full taxes and sometimes exploit legal loopholes with impunity. Traoré wants this to end, and this refinery is his tool. The launch event was attended by officials from the Ministry of Mines and Quarries, the Central Bank, and members of the armed forces, an unusual coalition that speaks volumes about the plant's strategic importance. Notably absent were representatives of Western gold corporations, who had reportedly not been invited. Instead, foreign advisors from Turkey and Iran were seen alongside technicians offering logistical support, highlighting Burkina Faso's ongoing pivot away from traditional Western alliances. Security at the site is being overseen by a specialized unit trained under the country's new anti-extraction task force. The unit's job is not just to guard the facility, but to prevent sabotage, internal leaks, and espionage, real concerns, according to sources inside the Ministry of National Security. "There are people who will lose billions when this refinery opens," one official noted. "They will not go quietly." The estimated cost of the project has not been publicly disclosed, but insiders suggest that funds are coming directly from gold reserves and newly created sovereign development accounts. Traoré has rejected foreign loans or grants for the project, insisting that only the wealth of our land should build what will protect that wealth. The refinery is being built in 3 phases: structural completion, installation of refining technology, and personnel training. Completion of the first phase is expected by early 2026. Once operational, the refinery will also serve as a national reserve vault, meaning that, for the first time, Burkina Faso will be able to store, value, and secure its gold without external approval. And this is only the beginning. Because the question now isn't just about gold. It's about what happens when a nation decides to no longer be looted and instead becomes its gatekeeper. But where does this refinery fit in Traoré's broader economic strategy? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't just break ground on a building, he broke apart a system. A system that for decades saw Burkina Faso extract gold from its soil only to hand over the power, profit, and prestige to others. To understand why the refinery is not just timely but revolutionary, one must look beyond the physical structure and examine the quiet bleeding that has plagued the country's gold sector for years. Burkina Faso is a top-tier gold producer, yet it's historically earned a fraction of what its output is worth. That's because raw gold, unrefined and uncertified, sells cheap on the international market, especially when it's exported under rushed contracts, misreported quantities, or shadow deals. Traoré's government has quietly audited several major mining contracts signed by past regimes, and the findings have been disturbing. In many cases, tons of gold were underdeclared, with royalty payments calculated on suspiciously low estimates of purity and volume. Billions have slipped through the cracks, sometimes deliberately. A refinery changes that. By processing gold on home soil, Burkina Faso will finally be able to verify purity, assign proper value, and set pricing in local and regional markets without relying on foreign certification. That alone blocks one of the most commonly exploited loopholes in the export chain: mislabeling. Foreign buyers have often claimed that Burkinabe gold is of lower quality or mixed with impurities, only to recertify it abroad at higher grades for massive resale profit. This process is invisible to the average citizen, but deeply destructive at the national level. It's also a question of timing. Why now? Traoré is racing against a collapse in trust, both among citizens and within the government's institutions. In rural mining towns like Houndé and Gawa, resentment has been brewing. Artisanal miners, who represent nearly 700,000 informal workers, often say they feel robbed twice, first by armed groups who tax their work, and second by the state, which they believe has done little to help them benefit from the gold beneath their feet. The refinery, Traoré believes, is a way to rebuild trust, not just with elites in Ouagadougou, but with the working class. Already, local committees are being formed to link small-scale miners with refinery personnel. The aim? To create formal partnerships that allow community cooperatives to sell their output directly to the state, with no intermediaries, no smuggling networks, no armed extortion. Traoré is also betting that the refinery will serve as a shield against manipulation. Historically, countries without refining capacity are forced to rely on foreign pricing benchmarks, typically set in London, Zurich, or Dubai. This leaves African nations vulnerable to market rigging, where prices are influenced not by the realities of supply and demand, but by speculation, hoarding, and Western-controlled gold exchanges. The refinery flips the table. By certifying its gold and pushing for regional trade frameworks, Burkina Faso aims to lead the Sahel in launching alternative valuation systems. The long-term goal is to create a West African gold standard that can eventually back currency reserves, finance infrastructure, and reduce dependency on volatile international markets. There's also a security dimension. Gold has been a key revenue source for insurgent groups in the Sahel, who tax miners or control smuggling routes. With a refinery and tighter supply chain control, Traoré's administration can monitor gold flows more effectively, choking off funding streams to insurgents while bringing more revenue into the formal economy. It's not just about money, it's about control. And make no mistake, this move is as much ideological as it is economic. Traoré, like Sankara before him, sees resource sovereignty not as a luxury, but as a right. A refinery, in his eyes, is the first infrastructure of defiance, a rejection of the colonial idea that Africans must always dig, while others refine and profit. But ideology alone doesn't make machines run or metals melt. So, who's helping Burkina Faso build this? And what kind of geopolitical fault lines are beginning to crack beneath the surface? That's where we're heading next. A refinery doesn't rise from the soil with patriotism alone. Behind the cement mixers, blueprint rolls, and molten furnaces, there are alliances, some visible, others deliberately obscured. And in the case of Burkina Faso's gold refinery, who's helping build it is just as significant as why it's being built. Because this isn't just metallurgy. This is geopolitics, cast in steel and fired in defiance. For over a decade, major Western corporations, particularly French, Canadian, and British mining firms, have dominated the extractive industries of West Africa. These companies brought in equipment, engineers, and finance, but always on their terms. Burkina Faso, like many of its neighbors, was locked into lopsided contracts that favored foreign interests, with little technical transfer and even less transparency. Traoré's decision to exclude them from the refinery project is not a casual omission, it's a calculated pivot. In their place, new partners have emerged, and their presence says a lot about where Burkina Faso now sees its future. At the center of the technical support structure is Turkey, a country that has rapidly expanded its influence across Africa over the past 5 years. Turkish metallurgical firms, especially those with experience in refining base and precious metals, have reportedly signed memoranda of understanding to supply machinery, assist with infrastructure layout, and train local technicians. One such firm, operating under a joint venture model, is said to be in charge of installing the initial purification systems that will enable Burkina Faso to produce gold bars of international-grade purity, 99.99%. Why Turkey? Because it offers a model many African states now admire, a post-colonial, non-Western industrial success with the ability to build without preaching. Ankara's non-interference policy and competitive pricing have made it a welcome alternative to the legacy powers of Europe. More importantly, Turkish assistance often comes with no political strings, a feature that has become essential for leaders like Traoré, who refuse to be lectured while trying to stand on their own. But Turkey is not alone. Iran, yes, the heavily sanctioned, resource-rich, and diplomatically isolated Iran, has quietly stepped in to provide metallurgical expertise, particularly in the field of small-scale refining and sanctions-resistant production chains. Iranian engineers, some of whom were trained under conditions of intense embargo, know how to design and operate gold refining systems without relying on Western proprietary tech. While Western analysts may raise eyebrows, Traoré sees this as a smart strategy, learning from those who've been forced to survive outside of the Western-led system. Iran, despite its international isolation, has built some of the most resilient and cost-effective refining technologies in the global south. In short, if you want to build under pressure, ask someone who's done it. Then there's Russia. Though not directly involved in construction, Russian technicians have reportedly provided strategic advice and helped supply equipment through third-party networks. With growing security ties between Burkina Faso and the Russian Federation, particularly through the Wagner-aligned African Corps, the refinery is becoming part of a broader Sahelian infrastructure map, one where security, economy, and sovereignty are linked. Importantly, all these partnerships are being coordinated through state channels, not private deals. Burkina Faso's National Development Committee, a newly empowered government body, oversees the procurement and vetting process, ensuring that foreign assistance complements, not dominates, local efforts. Contracts are being written to ensure technology transfer, local employment, and gradual Burkinabe control. What's missing? Western governments, NGOs, or Bretton Woods institutions. Not one has been invited to participate. Not the International Monetary Fund. Not the World Bank. Not even the EU's economic coordination offices. And that silence is loud, because it signals a new doctrine. Build without them, even if it's harder. And that's the trade-off Traoré seems willing to accept. No shortcuts, no bailouts, no fake partnerships where 90% of profits leak overseas. Just steady construction, with partners who understand the mission. But will this gold refinery stand alone? Or is it the first piece of a much bigger puzzle, a national industrial revolution hidden in plain sight? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. What began as a gold refinery is now being whispered about in government halls and regional think tanks as something far larger. Insiders are calling it the first brick in Traoré's industrial wall. Because if you follow the movements, the quiet purchases, the sudden training programs, the land clearances in regions like Koudougou, Bobo Dioulasso, and Tenkodogo, it becomes clear. This gold refinery isn't a standalone project. It's the opening move in a deeper industrial awakening. Burkina Faso has long suffered from a singular economic problem. It exports everything raw: gold, cotton, tomatoes, sesame, livestock. These resources leave the country in their most basic form, only to be processed, branded, and sold back at higher prices by nations with better infrastructure. This has kept Burkina Faso trapped in a cycle of dependency and low revenue despite high output. But over the past year, there's been a shift, a strategic reorientation that reveals Traoré's government is quietly laying down the foundation for domestic processing across multiple sectors. Take agriculture. In March 2025, the Ministry of Industry inaugurated a tomato processing plant outside of Tenkodogo, backed by local cooperatives and financed through a sovereign investment fund. The plant can handle over 100 tons of tomatoes daily and now supplies locally canned products to the military, hospitals, and schools, cutting dependence on imported tomato paste from Italy and China. A few months earlier, Traoré's team announced the launch of a rice packaging and milling hub, enabling Burkinabe-grown rice to finally be cleaned, sorted, and branded domestically for regional sale. Then there's cotton. The country's second biggest export is also transforming. The government has started rehabilitating old ginning factories and is negotiating with textile engineers to reopen a defunct spinning plant in Bobo Dioulasso. The goal is simple: spin and weave cotton at home, rather than exporting raw fibers to Asia and buying back overpriced garments. The slogan now circulating in internal briefings is, "From field to factory." All these projects are being woven into a larger plan known internally as the Strategic Autonomy Blueprint. It's not public yet, but fragments have emerged. Blueprints for industrial corridors, plans for solar-powered processing units, state-owned logistics fleets, and new trade routes connecting Sahelian countries via railway and paved roads. One confidential memo even described the refinery as the anchor for a future state gold bank, designed to back loans for industrial projects using certified gold reserves. And Traoré isn't just relying on the government push, he's giving teeth to cooperative economics. Through new policy decrees, regional unions and village associations are being encouraged to form production syndicates, groups that can collectively own processing equipment, access technical assistance, and trade directly with the state or neighboring countries. This approach decentralizes industrial power, avoiding the corruption traps of past regimes where mega-projects turned into personal empires. Critically, this isn't development for development's sake. Traoré has repeatedly framed these projects as a counterinsurgency strategy. The logic is simple. When young men have machines to run, seeds to sow, and goods to transport, they have less incentive to join insurgent groups. Economic infrastructure becomes a weapon against chaos. There's also a regional ambition at play. With Mali and Niger watching closely and already collaborating through the Alliance of Sahel states, there's talk of synchronizing industrial projects across borders. For instance, Mali's lithium, Niger's uranium, and Burkina Faso's gold could feed into a Sahelian resource network, where each country processes, certifies, and sells its products without foreign gatekeepers. Shared tech parks, shared trade rules, shared security pacts. In this light, the gold refinery isn't just about gold. It's a blueprint in disguise, a signal that Burkina Faso is done waiting for permission to industrialize. So the final question becomes this: with the world watching and old powers tightening their grip, can Traoré pull this off? Or will global resistance crush the dream before it fully rises? Let's bring it all together. By now, it's clear that Captain Ibrahim Traoré's gold refinery is not just a building. It's a battlefield. Not one of bullets, but of economic willpower. Not one of armies, but of global systems that have for centuries dictated how African countries use their resources, who profits, and who stays poor. By the way, we have launched merch that honors the African leaders who are taking a stand for Africa. Check them out, to show you also stand with loyal sons of Africa, no matter where you are. The refinery and the industrial wave building around it directly threaten the architecture of control that still holds Africa in its grip. And that's exactly where the storm is gathering. International backlash is already in motion. Major mining firms with existing concessions in Burkina Faso are rattled. Several have sent delegations to neighboring countries, trying to leverage diplomatic pressure against what they describe as state overreach and strategic unpredictability. A leaked memo from a European investment fund warns that the refinery could disrupt export-based asset securitization models, which is financial speak for this. They're losing control over a cash cow. But it's not just corporations feeling the heat. Western embassies, particularly from France and Canada, have reportedly raised concerns about the geopolitical alignment of Burkina Faso under Traoré. Their issue isn't the refinery itself, it's what it symbolizes. A break from the Western model of economic development. A model that relies on African dependence, not African capacity. And the concern is spreading. International institutions are beginning to tighten the screws, albeit subtly. Development aid disbursements are being reviewed. Insurance premiums on Burkina Faso gold shipments have mysteriously spiked. A recent World Bank statement praised Burkina Faso's commitment to transparency, but ended with a quiet warning. Macroeconomic stability must be maintained within the framework of global cooperation. Translation: don't go too far. But Traoré seems unfazed. Sources say he's already anticipating a financial siege and preparing countermeasures. One of them is the creation of a state reserve fund backed by gold, a hedge against currency instability and outside manipulation. Another is the push for barter-based regional trade, especially with allies like Mali, Niger, and Guinea, to reduce dollar dependency. The refinery could soon be used to settle trade balances in gold bars, bypassing the Western-dominated banking system entirely. Still, the risks are high. There's the technical challenge of building and running a world-class refinery with limited domestic experience. There's the diplomatic minefield of balancing new alliances without provoking unnecessary retaliation. And there's the internal pressure, ensuring that the refinery doesn't become another centralized power structure vulnerable to corruption or elite capture. But Traoré is betting on something deeper than money or metal, a public awakening. Across Burkina Faso, the mood is shifting. Civil society groups, youth movements, and even formerly apolitical traders are now talking about our gold, our refinery, our right. That psychological shift, from viewing gold as a curse managed by others to a tool mastered by the people, is perhaps the most dangerous development of all, at least from the perspective of the global order. Because if this succeeds, the model spreads. Imagine a continent where gold is refined in Bamako, oil is processed in Niamey, cobalt is smelted in Kinshasa, and lithium is molded into batteries in Harare. Imagine West African states linked not just by anti-insurgency pacts, but by railways carrying finished goods, not raw resources. Imagine African youth staying, not fleeing, because opportunity lives in their soil and their factories. This is the vision Traoré has seeded beneath the surface. And the refinery is just the first shoot breaking through. But it's also a gamble. Because the moment you try to escape the system that's been feeding on you, the system fights back. The next months will be critical. Will the refinery be completed on time? Will partners stay firm under pressure? And let us know in the comments section. Will Traoré survive long enough to finish what he started? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.